There are a number of weapons infamous for being so horrible only masochists or people with too much free time on their hands would attempt to use, which thankfully count as both. Their stats are so much lower than the basic starting weapons, more intended as being joke weapons instead of actual usable ones. You have more well-known weapons like the fork and the wooden sword, the lesser horrible tier like the butter knife and the torch, which I would argue is the actual worst weapon in the game, and then there is the outlier, which is also bad but not intentionally, and that being today's weapon. So today we will attempt to beat Skyrim with the Woodcutter axe. And not to be confused with the Woodcutter, the unique axe. So why exactly are Woodcutter axes so bad? It has a base damage of 5, tied with a pickaxe for damage, which is already one of the lowest tier damage. But there is a catch that makes the Woodcutter axe significantly worse. Because Bethesda games are made of spaghetti from a can, the axes do not benefit from any axe related perks, or any perks whatsoever. While it can level up one-handed, it does not benefit from any perks, letting it fall off after level 1. There is a poacher's axe, a unique Woodcutter axe that actually works as intended, but since I enjoy bashing my head against walls, I'm not allowing myself usage of that weapon. Usual other rules, so nothing else to go over? Let's get started on this misery. So when I was building my character, I decided to go with the wood elf utilizing a weapon whose sole purpose is to cut down wood, all because life is pain. I also have this be reflected in my attempt at recreating my sleep paralysis demons, and the world attempts to remove this monstrosity. However, fate loves to spit on me and I'm saved by a dragon, letting me live another day, and I'm gonna make it Skyrim's problem. As for the city lit by a burning cigar tossed haphazardly, nothing much to note, and I let Roloff fend off guards by himself as I ditch him to hang out in the other camp's frat house for the keys. Then I come back for their armor. I'm going to be limited on my offense, so best to supplement it with defense. I have beat Skyrim as both an ant and over-encumbered, so I'm used to slow movement speed, so I have the patience of a saint. Mostly. Somewhat. Not really. After ignoring everything on my way out, including the spider who really wants a taste of my buns, I make it outside to the fresh air and become one with the warrior stone, then booked it to Riverwood. It was not long until I could find my first woodcutter axe, and for some dumb reason I have an obsession of collecting axes in this playthrough. I immediately spit on my heritage and split wood, and taken a ring from my best friend's sister. For no real good reason, I decided to go through the back door heading through Embershard Mines. The bandits do take several slashes to take down, but thanks to my extreme prejudice towards my lumbar, I can swing as fast as a dagger to offset my DPS. After chopping up my dinner, if you know the Bosmers, I double checked at a grindstone and it turns out you cannot sharpen woodcutter axes. I take out my frustrations on the remaining nameless guards here for experience since I can level up my one-handed at the very least, then I return to Riverwood. I then hike my way up the road a bit to partake in playing the reverse Uno card on Paul Bunyan, which gives me enough experience to level up. Then I continue to take all the food from the Pelagias right in front of them, making them starve for the winter. Since I'm still in my setup phase, I go to my usual spots to dive in litter boxes, and outside Markarth I raid a farm harvesting all the vegetables and killing all but one chicken. That lone survivor will spread the terror that is Chopper, and how they will be a sinful menace to society. Then afterwards I scooped in all the litter boxes, taking anything that will help me out while continuing to decimate the local economy. I'm really going to be needing to rely on enchantments to get me through this run, and there is one enchantment I wanted to go for but it wouldn't work out, but oh well. More later on that. Once I finished my pilfering, I watched a live wood splitting demonstration, but they missed the 2-inch log. My actual business in town is at the Blue Palace, which I ignore the cries for help as I disenchanted some stuff. I was banking all my level ups on Civil here because I wanted to get Destruction level 30 for the augmented perks, which will help out a lot. Once I was happy with my leveling, I decided now would be a good time to take on Bleak Falls Barrow. You might ask why Orph did not enchant his axes, and to that I say, this is Orph we are talking about. Their brain hardly works half of the time, and the other half of the time it's a puzzle that nobody can figure out. The bandits outside the burrow took a few swings to take down, but by being aggressive and flaying like a fish out of water, I can thankfully get results. Inside the burrow proper, the simple bandits go down in a few swings, which I'm actually surprised about. I then watched a bandit fail at a simple perception check, then hacked away at some skewers before playing with spiders. I do have to play it safe with the healing, and it took quite a fair amount of swings to take down, enough to level me up. I then cut Arvel down. What? It's what the game tells you to do. As for the Draugr, the game ramps up the difficulty here as these bony boys have considerably more health than their living counterparts, with the Restless taking a considerable more amount of slashing to take down. I was not much in the way of danger physically, more just my patience. I also got the rattles from the blade traps, and this tetanus decreases stamina regeneration, so that also doesn't help my patience. I continue to be the third alarm clock, ruining the Draugr's dreams of a happier life, bringing them back to the 9-to-5 grind at a job they despise. There wasn't much for the rest of the dungeon dive that hasn't been said, so skipping to the boss fight, I get as many free hits off on the Overlord as I can, and the bastard kept taunting at me because of my pathetic DPS. I get it, I'm using a crap weapon because of skill issues. I turned the skill issue into a kill issue and I kept dancing around like a 2 left foot drunk, until eventually the Draugr is put down for a forever nap, and I can head into Whiterun. First thing on the agenda is selling off my junk to lighten the load, while also robbing the smith of all our gold because any unpatched spaghetti code is lore friendly. I take up Armin's request and he points me at Halted Stream Camp, which is already on my to-do list, so that solves that issue. I talk to my NPCs and I put the 2 brain cells trying to become 1 and enchanted some stuff, leveling up in the process and taking the fire enchanting perk and setting my axe on fire. Only I can start forest fires. Since I spent way too long playing with my junk, I missed out on the important lore, and Balgruuf has me go to kill a dragon as punishment. The fight itself wasn't too bad. Sadly, it is a fire damage my DPS isn't as great, but by bumping my DPS from 5 to 25, it is a very helpful boon. I am able to do so much more damage to the silly lizard, and despite it breathing fire, it really can't take the heat, and in 2 cycles I could bring the gecko to its knees, and I get a dragon soul for my troubles. Back at the castle, I headed upstairs and purloined any loose coins while talking to the Jarl, adding to my list of crimes against decency that I can't get arrested for just like being a Karen, and I headed to Halted Stream Camp. One banditeer was introduced to the spin cycle for moldy-ass clothes. Inside the dungeon proper, I did take a big beating in the middle. You know, diving headfirst into a mosh pit isn't the smartest thing, but this is me we're talking about. But by pausing space time to guzzle some potions, I could heal up and clear out the camp. Once the bodies were in splinters, I looted them and one of them had the poacher's axe. This axe works as intended as it has 2 more damage over the regular axe because I took a one-handed perk and it definitely shows up here. Won't be using it as I have a vastly superior version on hand. I also got Armin's sword but nobody gives a muck about that. When I returned to Whiterun I got a letter from the courier to go outside and crashes my game. Prick. Warping to a different location I could give Isolde a mammoth tusk and Armin his sword that he will never use, then I returned to Halted Stream to head to the Lord's. Well, I'm not a holy man. These bandits sure are now. While I chopped up a fisherman for no good reason, I decided a bonus objective at this point would be to find all 5 lumber mills and chop wood there. I stopped questioning what goes in my mind a long time ago. On my way to the first mill, I discovered Smokey the Bear sent an assassin after me. However, because the Forest Service's assassin budget was severely cut to make up for the logging industry's tax breaks, they had to send an assassin that does not recognize pathfinding around rocks. I also stole a horse here. Remember, I have very little in the way of morals. At Half Moon Mill, I immediately cut down the owner, sprucing up the place while the main vampire was out of town. While I could leave the crimes here, I added grand theft to my misdeeds list. Chopper is quite the evil individual. At least to make up for my evil ways, I do more blasphemy and split some more wood. Back in Whiterun, I decided to hit up a couple more mills just to mill out the runtime. And along the roadside I watched a fire mage and an ice mage settle their differences in a friendly smash brawl match, but I decided to plug in a 3rd control and choose Meta Knight and easily destroyed them. Funnily enough, they both fell into the river, making for easy body cleanup. During my river swim, the mud crabs chose violence today and killed a school of slaughterfish. To avenge my friends, I returned the slaughter to the crabs here until I have enough for a crab leg fest. At Voltheim Tower, I tried to pay 50 gold here for the persuasion check, which I'm surprised I actually passed. I then killed the outlaw to get my money back, and turns out she doesn't have my gold anymore. I was going to let all the bandits here live, but because they toss a 50 gold into a sack instead of their hands, they will all die. My god, my Kaseki brain rot is way too strong. The purification was thankfully very effective, goes to show what fire can do to supplement damage. Before long the place is all done, I toss cheese into the waters, then continue my way, only to get stuck on rocks for a little bit. First main attraction along the way is discovering that the only thing arachnophobia fears is hydrophobia, so next time we see Peter Parker, I'm tossing him into the ocean. Next one is giving me a Stormcloak prisoner a very big mallet. The mallet has a fear enchantment, so it's very amusing watching the prisoner chase down his captors. Eventually vengeance was won, and I claimed my hammer back. I made it to my next lumber camp, and I continue to log my log cuts violently, and adding another axe to my collection. It is my obsession at this point. I did wander into a nice pond that features a Creation Club dungeon, which I've never done before. The dungeon is for necromancers, and I solve the puzzles and I'm hit with a bunch of telekinesis attacks, which does minuscule amounts of damage. I play with torches, and the only way for me to escape is using the Staff of Worms, which I cannot use to cut trees, so I had to reload a save and left a crypt behind for an inevitable future run. My mind continued to wander without any solid direction, as if it had a direction to begin with, and I eventually found my next mill, and that means more access for my kleptomaniac needs. In this moment of joy, I added more pieces of wood to my cellar the authorities shouldn't know about, and I got wisdom from Maik the Liar. Truthfully better than 90% of Skyrim's cast. My mind then turned from mill to kill, and I haven't killed the Dark Brotherhood in quite a long time. Outside Riften, instead of heading inside the north entrance as intended, I thought I could be cheeky and head into one of the side entrances. Well, it seems the game really wants to introduce Skyrim as the crime den of Skyrim, as all the guards told me to go through the main entrance, the illusion of choice. I then told the guard on the north side that he can sit on a pine tree, then I went into the orphanage. I wanted to ask Squirrel if I could adopt a child, but my mispronunciation costed her her life. I then told Aventus the good news, so I could go to sleep in a couple of days. So while I could do the rational thing and continue the main story, I decided to do the biggest waste of time I could. I traveled to Solstein. I wanted to get a chaos enchantment like I did in the New Game Plus run to carry me through the run, so I did the vendor reset glitch to try to get the enchantment without getting a champion's cudgel to the face, and I spent 15 minutes doing this before saying hell with it. I then returned to Skyrim in shame. With my character's ego deflated, I figured it is time I could head to the Great Sky Retirement Home, and on my way there my smooth brain might have gotten lost at one point, thinking Darkwater Crossing is a mill and not a mining community. Wood does not come from mines, sadly. During my climb up to Iverstead, I did get into a tussle with a saber cat, and surprisingly I could come out on top. Since I don't like the people of Iverstead, I doxed their location to a troll so they had to deal with that nonsense, and the guards really don't feel like doing their jobs today. As we're climbing the unnecessary amount of steps, I made sure Barknar tasted some bark, and the ice wolves were barking up the wrong tree. I also chased down Krita to fuel my meaningless one-handed experience. As for the frost roll nobody likes, I used the wood elf's hippie powers to pacify the yeti, then because I'm such a horrible person, I repeatedly swung into its backside, making for a very easy kill. Do I feel bad for this act of treason? Hell no, this arse has killed me more than enough times. I will throw it off mountainsides if I have to. At least I found the only use the Bosmers have. Afterwards, I did pointless initiations nobody gives a rat's arse about, including the ability to project my body at speeds that would probably break my neck. Next stop is Usingrav, and at this point I'm feeling tired, so I returned to the camp where I might have chopped down the fishermen and took a nap. I then woke up in a log cabin on the other side of the map with Astrid. The Dark Brotherhood has gotten away with the simple act of living for way too many runs in a row that I'm comfortable with, so with the palm of my hand she is cut down. I also released the prisoners of their mortal coil because they will vanish regardless after this quest. Afterwards, I walked in and, oh hey look, we're already at Usingrav. Outside, it seems the Necromancer's minions forgot about the minion part and they were already dead. Inside the dungeon, the Conjurers were having lumbar problems, so I fixed their living problems. A little further inside, there was a party that I was not invited to thanks to my ugly mug, and the couples were broken up and the kegs were already empty. Saddened, I continued my exploration. Further inside, I remembered that bone meal can grow on trees, which I cannot have, so the bones were boned. I then grabbed my screw you reality shout and dashed through the gates to find the wonderful result of paper mills. Instead of going into the innkeep's bedroom, I had a more important mission in life, splitting more logs with someone nagging in my ear. Unsolicited, mind you. I also got another axe that Malborn will have to log around. Back inside Riverwood, I had cultists question me on why the hell I went to their island for no good reason and then attacked me. One of the guards did such a horrible job and ran away from the people attacking his settlement he is supposed to guard. Thankfully, with a couple swings, the cultists were split, and I relieved the guard of his position. He never did anything anyways, and he won't be missed. Inside the inn, I was invited to the innkeep's bedroom. Instead of a fun time, she gives me menial tasks like slaying dragons. Before indulging in my favorite word that's an anagram of laughters, I somehow remembered about the mill near Solitude. Well, I didn't remember per se, more I wandered there when heading to Dragon's Bridge. So you know what that means. Deforestation for minuscule profit margins, bidding on my heritage and continuing my axe hoarding obsession. Inside Dragon Bridge, I watched a mail service materialize in front of my eyes, then I get the password to the secret clubhouse. With my eyes on the prize, I wandered south until I came across my mortal enemies, the Spriggans. I'm actually surprised axes don't do bonus damage to them, but oh well. I walked into the sanctuary and began swinging away at my heart's content. They would not believe all the splinters they caused Skyrim, so I stick these saplings in a trunk until their features were never green. At least their blood will spruce up the place. Once they were done pining for the afterlife, I returned tomorrow for the reward. The real reward was the horrible tree puns along the way, and also restoring balance to the universe, but oh well. Next up is a date with Salaknir, since that dragon was the only person that ever would swipe right for me. Turns out they catfished me, so I dumped them on the spot and returning to my forever single lifestyle. At least the fight went by super quick. Hilsa Salaknir was a very cold individual weak to my fire axe. With a soul in my belly, I returned to Solstheim for chaos, but still no luck. I did briefly decide to attempt to get the champion's cudgel, but that didn't work out. Outside of Raven Rock, I found a bunch of ash spawns harassing a guard. He wants me to prevent the ash spawn from getting into Raven Rock, so I have a plan on how to defeat the entire horde. I led the ash spawns right into Raven Rock. Yeah, I am very good at my job. I did pause briefly to get a frost axe to do much more damage against the ash spawn, and outside Fort Frostmoth they did have a bunch of spawns fighting me, but by dancing around the end result of burning wood, I can put these charcoals to bed. They do hit somewhat hard and I did have to back off to pick them off one at a time, so yeah, this turned out to be a giant waste of time. Turns out when fighting the enemies on the inside of Frostmoth, they hit harder for one, and for two, and more importantly, I cannot bring them outside. This includes the boss, meaning I can't choose to fight. Also, the captain is level 25 and I'm only level 10, so I would get the horny bonk very fast. I decided to cut my losses and proceed to try to get a chaos enchantment from the blacksmith. For 10 minutes. Until learning that the items with the chaos enchantments don't enter the level pool until level 20. I've gotten this far, I could probably see the rest of the run with my current gear. I return to Delphine and next up is the Thalmor Embassy. I then return to Solitude and proceed to unload my load, including my collection of woodcutter axes on Malborn just to make him appalled, then put on the fancy clothes I found at a Goodwill to make me seem somewhat important, then gave a drink to my friend I met 20 seconds ago to distract the party. No idea what his announcement was about, probably something pertaining to Shadow, but I don't want to stick around and find out. I was then reunited with my axes, which was kinda eating me up inside, then I cleaned out the Thalmor here. One by one they became my meaningless experience, and they threw themselves on me like zombies on a chainsaw. Down in the basement I read my books, then saved Malborn from his captors. While I could let him live, I don't believe in mercy, so I chopped both him down and the prisoner nobody cares about. And then to flex dominance I had a very easy time with the frost troll down here. I then returned to my favorite town since it has wood in the name, gave Embry some booze I smuggled out of the embassy, and then relayed the info to Delphine. I also gave Sven's song the canonical ending. Back in Riften, instead of heading down to the Ratways, I left town to hit up the final mill that I only remembered after my first recording session. After a lovely swim through the waters and watching a dragon attack a fort that I don't really care about, I arrived at Heartwood Mill, so I put my heart into slicing the wood. And my heart was broken, I could not find a woodcutter axe. Because I'm angry, I decided to throw some gems down in the marketplace and watching people kill each other over them. I enjoy chaos indeed, even if I can't have the enchantment. I also created a traffic jam with some gems just because. Before heading into the Ratways, I walked into the alchemist shop I've never known about until ironically watching a Skyrim Town ambience video. You always learn things in every playthrough. Inside the Ratways proper, I'm reunited with another beautiful axe, and also one of the fellow madmen wanted to blow me up with some bomb arrows. I always get caught off guard with these pay-to-win arrows. After indulging the whims of those with similar sanity as me, I started to clear out the wizards, continued to be the ass I am, then talked to Esbern. After a quick brawl that is essentially me mindlessly pressing a button until the wizards are dead, I went outside to the fresh air and self-defended against Shivari and threw her body into a boat. Hey, you can't row in Skyrim, so no one will ever find her. Back in the town named after the two things it has going for it, the worst faction was reunited, and instead of listening to them babble on, I enchanted my axe collection and also played around with paper. Anything to make things more entertaining. I then had a weird fever dream where in my evil rampages I attacked some innocent farmer, then had Delphine come after me for being the menace to society that I am. Thankfully it was a dream from another multiverse, and since I feel like taking the scenic route in this reality, I decided the best course of action is heading to Dragon's Bridge in order to head to Karspire. It was worth it in the long run because that means more wood to split, making my character happy. As for heading to the Spire, nothing really happened besides using the whirlwind sprint glitch to speed up my travels, and getting mauled at some point by more evil kitties. Also during my adventure I came across a little ruin that contained the Knights of the Nine Creation Club armor there. Before donning the armor, I just had to chop down the bandits here. When I tried to put on the armor, I was deemed unworthy because of my very evil ways. You know, I think I have been a menace to society for too long, so I figured I could repent as a way of character development. Plus it's Oblivion fan service, so I decided to go through with the redemption arc. But beforehand, the main reason I went all this way. Karspire, which is nearby. I did not feel like attacking the Forestworn today. The dragon was doing a very good job at that, and I just went on inside to easily take down the level 1 Briarheart here. This one's bark is way worse than its bite, that's for sure. Before the seal I got the kinkiest spell from the chest. I then tapped some sap from my trunk. Oh wait, that sounds very wrong. Editor, please delete this line. While inside Skyhaven Temple, I got a blade outfit as a backup to the knight's armor since the blade armor is perfect for endgame defense, and plus I have a lot of travels ahead of me. I got my info needed to ditch the blades, then enchanted my blades attire, so I figured I could go on my redemption arc now across Skyrim. First stop is Rorikstead, except I got turned around at one point, and I had to put down a conjurer, but oh well. Outside Rorikstead, Alduin was waking up one of his friends, so it was right to save the small town from the dragon attack instead of stealing all its food as usual. The fight was actually pretty simple. I embodied the forbidden double chop technique to chop down the tree twice as fast or something. I prayed at my second shrine, and for the most part the rest of the shrines didn't have much going on with them. I returned to Karspire for the third. Dragon was still mauling, but not my problem. The fifth shrine was very close to the standing stones, with a Thalmor body here, so if you ever need a pretty decent early game rope, here you go. The 6th one is near the Dawnguard castle, and the fugitive gives me a bow. I was going to return it like the nice person I am, but the hunter just cancels the conversation and kills the fugitive right then and there. Well, I was still needing a sparks axe, so that works out. I also had some wannabe vigilants attack me. I knew I was forgetting something. I didn't feel like abandoning this arc, so I hit up the Stendar shrine. Before the final 2 shrines, which are thankfully very close to each other, I decided to take an icy swim to Septimus's outpost, and I started to talk to myself to get the keys to Aftian. I then returned to Volthoom Towers and re-cleared the dungeon. This time the bandit leader was wearing silver armor. If only that actually meant something. I climbed the mountainside and came pretty damn close to Sheerpoint. I have already hit my weekly quota of bashing my head on cement walls, so I left the dragon and priest be. Before too long I was at the final 2 shrines, and my character arc is finally complete, letting me wear the armor of the Nines, which if worn together the full set is a great upgrade on my current attire, so now I can walk the path of righteousness or something. Too bad the cats of Ice Age had a falling out. Inside Afton, I wanted to avoid combat, but Jadar had a woodcutter axe, and he was also hostile so I could take it. I didn't want to kill him, but self-defense. I get his axe and his friends, so I get a net positive on axes this dungeon type, so at the very least I'm happy. Inside the big gravity room, I became Final Destination and plummeted down an unfortunate spider, then rushed through the rest of the lower part, because I wanted to be done recording at some point. Well, my brain is small, so I decided to dance with the Centurion, but after taking a few hicks, I chickened out like the coward I am, and plucked away at the Falmer that were kinda chipping away at me. I then returned to the Centurion and was able to weave around its attacks, making for a pretty easy fight. As for the funky mushroom land, I didn't really feel like having a bad trip today, so I skipped past everything and proceeded to test the upper limits of my smarts by pressing buttons in a row until I'm blessed with toilet paper shredded from the divine trees. Back at the Sky retirement home, I get an earful from the Greybeards about how the youth of today are using chainsaws instead of the 2-person handsaws like they had when they were young. I then learned my defog shout to clear away the blizzards, letting me be able to get to work and not have to take a snow day, while in the meantime knocking the ice-covered tree branches onto power lines. Before too long, I'm indulging in the linguistics of party snacks, and then going back in time to find that the place I live at was actually once covered in trees and not cornfields. Who knew? I also plot important shout, but who the heck cares? As for the first Alduin fight, I really was not taking any chances, so I drank every option I could and just hacked away doing the easy cycle of hacking away at the wings, and then when he attempted to take flight, I threw insults at him, and during the landing animation I could heal up in the meantime. Lather, rinse, and repeat until he got me pretty low in health, where I leveled up, and then resuming the pain train. Didn't take too long, mostly because of my enchantments, and eventually the dragon was in timeout mode. And then afterwards I could talk to Party Snacks about starting the endgame. When I traveled to Whiterun to talk to Bulgur for the Peace Council, for some very stupid reason, I have absolutely no idea why, the game made me unfit to wear the Crusaders relic, so I'd have to do the pilgrimage all over again. This is why nice guys always get taken advantage of. I said fuck this shit motherfucker, threw the Crusader armor into the moat, and went back to Evil Orf. The first thing I did was steal a gemstone right next to the sleeping Jarl, and then wake him up from his wonderful dream and demanding I bring a dragon to his palace. Morally questionable logic. This feels so much more natural. At this point, I just remembered about a relevant quest I should probably do. No, totally didn't forget about the quest, just like how my ex forgot about picking me up at the park during a thunderstorm making me walk home. Oh no. While I was in Whiterun, I talked to the local priestess about the tree that is looking extra ripe for firewood. She says the tree is dying and needs special sap to revive it. I returned to Helgen and hiked up to Orphan Rock, where I had to deal with a covenant witch that's led by what looks to be my ex. She was very keen on blowing me up, but by weaving around fireballs I could close the gap and take a tree hugger's worst nightmare. I then returned to Whiterun to continue the quest, but I did not talk to the right NPC at this point, which will bite me in the ass later, but oh well. It was a short hike past some skinny dippers to the Eldergleam Sanctuary. The place is very peaceful and beautiful, but to get to the tree I had to use Nettlebane to get up there. I don't see this as feeling a run, as Nettlebane is used as a key instead of a weapon, like using Dragon Shouts, otherwise no weapon restriction run is possible because of Party Snacks, but oh well. After making some maple syrup, some Spriggans came out to play, and because I just hate trees, I started whacking at these oversized weeds until they all withered. Sadly, there were no survivors during the Spriggan attack. I said there were no survivors during the attack. I returned to Whiterun to hand over the quest, but it wasn't the end result, so I had to reload. Thankfully, I saved before the quest, so I redumped my ex, brought along Maurice to the cavern, and right before the tree, he did not like my barbaric ways and offers to make peace with the tree. He does his world-building prayer, and the tree gives him a sapling. However, to keep space-time stable, I once again made sure there was a tragedy in the sanctuary, and for some mysterious reason, there were no survivors. I returned to Whiterun to hand over the tree, continuing the cycle of renewal. So the Eldergleam needs to come down. Thankfully, there is a professional in the house. In its place, a sapling is planted, wrapping up that gigantic detour. Next up is the Peace Council, and I was struggling very hard to stay awake during probably the most boring political theater by the two most annoying leaders Tamriel could possibly spit out. God, this quest is horrible. Should probably make that video at some point. Eventually get my Uber contact information, enchanted all my axes to make my Kleptomania worth it, called Odie over and making him my pet, and then I traveled to the final dungeon. Skuldalfin was a little bit dicey, mostly because I decided violence was the course of action. The Draugr outside didn't pose too much of a threat, but when dealing with two dragons at once, that proved to be a little bit of a headache. But by the time one dragon went down, the other was in prime position to get chopped down, and now I have two dragon souls inside my belly. As for the rest of the exterior, I just ran by the rest of the way into the insides, and chopped up all the Draugr before I could focus on the brain-taxing puzzles. There really wasn't much for this dungeon dive. If the Overlord at the start of the game wasn't much of a threat, this one isn't any better. A few chops and down it goes, and then I'm back outside once again. Because I'm feeling especially cocky, or stupid, probably the latter, I decided I want to have a go at the Dragon Priest. The wights were pretty annoying, but a few chops and down they go. As for Nakreen, it really couldn't handle all the offense I spat out at it, and it was actually a pretty quick fight all things considered and went down easily enough. I ripped off their mask and donned it, and then I entered Lumberjack Heaven. Soon wasn't that threatening of a foe. Turns out the best way to beat offense is by having a much better offense. And with my high swing speed, I could burn his pecs to cinders in a relatively short amount of time, and I could grab my logging crew to chop down General Sherman. We shouted away the fog for better weather, and then Alduin came out to play. Alduin 2 is never a threat unless you are me, but thankfully I have so many potions I haven't been using, so I could just go to town and slash away. At one point I did miss a Dragon Rend shout, so I had to wait for Alduin to calm down and land again, and really at this point the fight was good as done. I chopped, and eventually the tree came tumbling down, and subsequently exploding for some reason, and I have successfully beat Skyrim with the Woodcutter axe. Much easier than I was expecting. I think the ease of the run didn't come down to the Woodcutter axe per se, but rather the enchantments. The weapon's low damage, coupled with the lack of leveling up the perks, made it fall off pretty quickly all things considered, but by supplementing the damage with enchantments, especially with the augmented perks and enchanting perks, I could more than easily make up the damage. Plus the high attack rate of the axes really helped out the DPS, being equivalent to a dagger. I think the overall moral of the story, besides don't have any Woodcutter axes in the open or else I will steal them because I'm very morally flawed, is that the enchantment system in Skyrim is really powerful and is able to make any weapon that is not a torch an actual threat. Now imagine what I could do with a fork. Well, I had fun with the run, a nice and simple run after the several more complex runs I've done recently. If you like the run, be sure to give a like, subscribe for more masochism, and any other ways I could torture myself, leave them down below. This has been Orpheolus, and I'll see you on the next one.